Friday from Atlanta, I'm going to have you back in your little suburban house in time to see the football game on Sunday afternoon.
Louis, if we are lost, I don't want to hear about it.
I never been lost in my life.
I think one of the most memorable scenes in Deliverance has to be the opening sequence where these four guys pull into this gas station way the hell and gone back in the mountains, and they encounter this boy who seems to be mentally disturbed or deficient in some way, but who has a banjo.
Rosper Pallenberg, who's my assistant on the picture, I sent him off to try and find someone, and he came back with this kid.
Billy Joe Redden was this incredible young man. He was 15 years old. He was in the second grade at that time. It's what Jim Dickey used to call the land of people with 9 fingers, because everybody had lost a finger doing something. Either they'd had it chopped off or they were born without it or something.
Talk about genetic deficiencies. Not pitiful.
When John Borman was casting, he always had me come in because how we related to each other was very important to him. We all knew immediately this was the kid that we wanted.
And I said, oh, it's fantastic. And Rosper said, well, there's only one problem. He can't play the banjo.
But they found a way to do it with another boy who was a great banjo player and could do his fingering here. So all he had to do was do this. So he put his arm here, and the other boy held the banjo's neck, and that's how we did that scene.
And every time they stopped the playback, he would turn to the kid. He'd say, "We sure can play that thing, can't we? We sure can play that thing." It was magical. Then you remember the old guy came out who had that hat and started to dance. Nobody told him to dance.
Dueling Banjos is a traditional piece. It must have just arisen out of, banjo playing up there in the Appalachians. It's a kind of battle, a feud between these two. So, and in a sense, it's between the mountain men and the urban men. And it has a quality to it of somehow expressing the whole film.
I'm lost. God damn, I can play all day with that guy.
After we finished Billy's stuff, John Borman came to me and he said, "Ronnie," he said, "you should be proud." He said, "because we owe Billy's performance to you." I don't know that that's true, but I am proud, and it means a lot to me that he said that.
Damn, you play a mean banjo.
Of course, the first time he worked was when we were at the gas station when they did the song together. Then he came back later and appeared on a bridge that we crossed under.
One of my favorite shots in the whole film is the first day when they first start out in the canoes, and then Billy's up on that bridge and sort of with that banjo going like a pendulum of a clock, and sort of Drew trying to recreate that moment.
The shot in the canoe looking up at the boy with the banjo, swinging it back and forth, is as good a shot as you'll ever see in any picture. It's almost a 360.
He had this incredible effect on the audience, but I always feel like it had something to do with whatever that magic was that happened, because he met Ronnie Cox.
Nature makes Deliverance a widescreen film first. The sense of the river, the sense of the woods, but also the way Borman and Vilmos, Sigmund, framed the scenes.
John Borman was preparing Deliverance, and he was looking for a cinematographer in those days. He didn't know yet that who he wants to hire. And he saw the dailies for McCabe and Mrs. Miller. And I know that the studio hated the dailies because they were so desaturated and soft. But Borman said, wow, this is something very interesting, I want to talk to this guy.
And I met Vilmos, and we spent some time together. And when he told me the story of how he came out of Hungary, you know, he was a film student in Budapest in '56, at the time when the Russians came in. And I thought someone who had been fired on by the Russians and had survived was the man. And he was tough and wiry and the guy I needed. Because this was going to be tough. You know, shooting this picture on this raging river and in very, very difficult circumstances where you couldn't have the kind of backup that a cameraman would normally expect to have. And I wanted someone who also could operate as well as light.
There she is.
When I was looking for locations, before Vilmos came into the picture, I was looking for locations and trying to find this river. And the river obviously was vital to the story. And being rather young and foolish, I chose this river, which was virtually impossible to get into.
Well, we fucked up.
But because it was so hard to reach, it looked pristine and wild, which is what I needed.
Louis! You're gonna kill us both, you son of a bitch, before we ever see you in the water!
For the river scenes, we would go in four-wheel drive vehicles to get us into the river at a certain point, and then we'd go with the two canoes, the four actors, Vilmos Sigmund, the cameraman, myself, and Art Brooker, who was a grip, sometimes with the sound, and often not. Sometimes we shot dialogue without sound. We dubbed it on afterwards because of the sound of the river.
Let's get up to speed here, Hoss. All right, let's go.
And we spent the whole day going down. We brought our lunch in a sealed plastic bag, and we went down the river, shot the scenes, and then we were picked up at a point down below. And that's how we did it.
It's gonna be fun. Just follow us.
Hey, what happens if we flip this thing over?
Of the four of us, the only one who'd ever been in a canoe before was Ned Beatty, who was playing the biggest klutz in the canoe, right? Yeah, I had fished in one, and I had spent some time in one. I was the only one who had actually ever been in the woods before.
One funny thing is that when we were doing the canoe, I wanted to have the wooden canoe because I felt it was more homey, more cozy, like Ed.
I said, look, John, you know, you're the star. You should pick first, praying that he would take the pretty one. And he did.
This green wooden canoe was the worst canoe to go down this rapids with because it just, every rock we hit, it just, you could hear the thing breaking underneath us, whereas the other canoe could go right over rocks and everything.
All right, now go left, dummy. Come on, go left.
So I made a terrible blunder, but I made an artistic choice. Bert recently sent me the gift of a canoe that was like my canoe, and he has Voight's choice on the canoe, and he sent it to me recently, you know.
Well, for the Lord's sake, will you look at that? What do we do now?
Half of whitewater canoeing is picking the correct line. If you choose the correct line, a set of rapids can be a piece of cake. If you choose the wrong line, it can be disaster.
Oh my God! Oh.
You know, we trained them, and their abilities were varying, shall I say, you know. Bert didn't want to be told how to do it. He just barreled in there and did it pretty much okay, you know, through sheer willpower and strength.
Go! Go!
John Voight learnt it very carefully and all the techniques and was kind of okay.
Woo! I'm with it!
The same with Ronnie Cox. But when Ned was with John Voight, who was, you know, a bit tentative about it, you know, and he would get into a rage because he'd be in the front there. And if John Voight screwed up at the back, he was the one who was going to be pitched into the river.
Borman said to me, I want you to read this book, and it was called Zen and the Art of Archery. There was one called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Racing, which I had read. And one of the things is that the arrow releases you. You don't release it, you pull it back, and it goes when it's time to go, and it goes where it's going to go, which is right in the bullseye. And as we were training on the river, I was training with a guy named Freddie Bear, who had the Bear bow, which was named after him, who had killed every animal in the world with a bow and arrow, including a rhinoceros.
Yeah! By damn, he got one. Terrific, Louis.
I hate him.
First night they spend together, you know, there's a sense, there are hints that there's something out there, you know, something threatening. They all have a few drinks, and there's a line where John Voight character says, whatever happens in Atlanta, nobody can find us here.
No one can find us up here.
And he's saying it in a kind of relief, the sense that they have got away. But of course, we later on, you know, that we realize that they are cut off totally and can't be rescued and found.
Now we come to this scene, this campfire scene, and each one of us had our ideas. Like I had my idea about this scene. I was going to be a little drunk. Then Ned had his idea. That Ronnie's got it. And Bert was really going to carry the scene to a certain degree.
Now, in the name of modern technology. How sweet, oh yeah.
And John, the way he put the camera, like there was one scene where the camera was stationary, and we thought we hear something. Bert leaves, and we're there. He goes around the back and then comes back through, and it's all one shot.
Jesus! Louis, you scared the shit out of me.
It was an incredible shot. Very brave. It could have taken you out of the movie had it not worked.
I don't know. I thought I heard something.
Something or someone?
It was like introducing an element of fear.
I don't know.
That something is not right, because that's the first time, basically, when they think that maybe people are following them.
And by the same token, when Voight goes out early in the morning and tries to shoot a deer and gets this deer fever, which is that your hand starts to shake. In the point of kill, you can't keep still, and we see that. So later on in the film, when in order to survive, he has to try and kill this mountain man, and we see him get the shakes again, we know that he missed the deer, and he's probably going to miss the man. All those tensions were set up there, and also the slight irritations between them that were coming out.
Hope to God we can get off this river today.
You know, the Ned Beatty character was getting irritated by being teased by the Burt Reynolds character, and he kept calling him fat.
I'm not mad at you, Ed. Just do me a favor, don't holler at me. I'm not used to being hollered at. Damn friend of yours screamed at me all day long yesterday.
Hell, you son of a bitch.
So these little tensions were growing up there. All these seeds were sown for what was to happen later.